First, a picture taken last October in 2024. It's a beautiful sunny day. There are kids playing soccer, young teenage girls to be exact. And although you can't see them, you can imagine the parents like me on the sidelines, cheering loudly when their child's team scores a goal or gets a turnover. And if I told you that this picture was taken in Chester, Pennsylvania, a small historic town to the southwest of Philadelphia, situated right along the Delaware River, you might also mentally add in a nice fresh river breeze and some boats passing by. All in all, a magical day. But let's take a closer look at what's off center stage. What at first glance appears to be a white puffy cloud is actually a large plume of smoke coming out of a smokestack that's part of the largest trash incinerator in the entire United States. It burns 1.2 million tons of trash per year. About a third comes from Delaware County, of which Chester is a part. A third comes from Pennsylvania, including the city of Philadelphia. And the final third comes from New York State. Off to the right, what look like low-hanging puffy clouds are also clouds of smoke. Those are coming from an oil refinery that's owned by one of the largest airline companies in the United States, and it's where it produces its jet fuel. This facility has extremely old and outdated pollution control technologies, which it's constantly petitioning not to have to upgrade. And it's currently out of compliance with the Clean Air Act in terms of ground level ozone and other metrics. So suddenly, our seemingly perfect, postcard-worthy picture has taken a pretty dark turn. And it's even darker still when we consider what's just beyond that incinerator, which is the county's sewage treatment plant. And just beyond that, less than a 5-minute drive in the neighboring borough of Marcus Hook, we have an enormous liquid natural gas refinery. It processes LNG that is drilled or fracked out of the Marcellus Shale in the western part of the state and brought through a network of enormous pipelines through to the refinery. And just behind us, we have 2 large chemical plants situated side by side. And just behind that, one of the largest paper product manufacturing plants in the United States. So what we have here is a scene that we've created, a center stage built on a partially remediated toxic dump site with a whole range of heavily polluting facilities all around. And when these young girls run down the field in early puberty, they're breathing in deeply all of this heavily polluted air into their lungs. But let's focus for a minute on that adult in the photo, a man we'll call Bob. Bob's the referee, and he's from Chester, born and raised. He's got a wife and 3 children, and he lives really nearby. Bob used to play soccer in his youth, running up and down the field, and he continues to do it because he enjoys the sport and to earn some extra money to help support his family on weekends. Recently, Bob hasn't been feeling well. He's got headaches, he's got bloody noses, he's got burning eyes and sinuses, and he's got a really bad cough. He's had all of those most of his life, though, as do most of the residents in Chester. It's kind of normal. But recently he's been feeling worse than usual. Unfortunately, there's virtually no primary care available in the predominantly poor and predominantly black city where he lives, Chester. So it takes some time before his wife persuades him to make the trip 30 minutes away to an emergency room to get a workup. And there the doctors diagnose him with cancer. Cancer in his liver, to be exact. What happens next is fairly predictable. Bob gets referred to an oncologist, and he goes with his wife and with his older sister for moral support. And the oncologist is puzzled because Bob's in his late 30s. And most liver cancer, the median age of onset is 62, so he's really young to have come down with liver cancer. So the oncologist asks Bob a set of questions, and he focuses a lot on Bob's lifestyle choices. He asks some questions about his diet and exercise. He asks Bob questions about his smoking and about his drinking habits. And he asks Bob questions about his history of infections, because infection with a range of viruses and bacteria are associated with specific types of cancer. And in the case of liver cancer, infection with hepatitis B and C is strongly associated. But Bob has a healthy BMI. I mean, he's running on the fields on the weekends, chasing after his 3 young children. He's a family man through and through, and he does not smoke, and he does not drink. And he's also never had hepatitis, and the doctor runs another set of tests, and he's negative. So the doctor next turns to asking about Bob's family history. And at this point, the doctor starts to nod knowingly. Because Bob's mom, who's in her 60s, was just diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And his father passed away when he was only 17 from lung cancer. And he has a sister and an aunt and an uncle who all are struggling with cancers, pancreatic, esophageal, and uterine. So the doctor very reasonably concludes that cancer runs in Bob's family, and he likely has some kind of cancer predisposition gene that he's inherited. So he notes that in the medical record, and then he moves on to what his primary task is, right? Bob's surgery and radiation and chemotherapy. And I think we all know a Bob, and we're all rooting for Bob to get better. What the doctor doesn't consider, although he's right, the cancer runs in Bob's family, clearly, is that Bob lives here, a mere fence line away from that same oil refinery. When he's not working at the facility located in Chester itself, which is a prominent facility that many kids from all over the county come to, he's at this facility, which is located on the border of Upper Chichester and Aston, also in Delaware County, just to the west of Chester. It's also one of the largest outdoor youth sports facilities. And here, this is a picture I took just last Sunday, as parents like me watch their kids play sports. You can see in the background what at first glance appears again to be a cloud, but is actually a large plume of smoke coming from that same oil refinery. And if we look at the parking lot as we come and leave, and that's actually Bob, I promise I wasn't stalking him, he just by coincidence captured him in this photo, but you can see in the background there, right, there's a big tank farm. It actually holds 2.8 million gallons of crude oil and various kinds of petrochemicals that are actually stored and used then by that same oil refinery. And it's connected through a high-pressure, highly flammable and explosive pipeline that runs right along next to the fields and under the fields where the young children are playing. In fact, in Delaware County, we've built this environment over the course of decades, right? And a wonderful student here at Haverford, Soshi Horna, made this map last summer to illustrate, it's not everything, but it includes a lot of what that polluting infrastructure looks like here in Delaware County. We can see the red dots indicate sites that are emitting heavy amounts of pollution into the air. The orange lines indicate the I-95, a major interstate running right along the Delaware River north-south, and then the other one going up north is the 476 with high volumes of traffic releasing pollution into the air. We have the International Airport in Tinicum also releasing a lot of pollution. We also have this network that we're not conscious of because it's all underground and subterranean of pipelines, right, that are carrying crude oil and the fracked LNG, which has a lot of radioactive particulate matter in it, and other kinds of hazardous materials literally under our feet, and quite an extensive network there, especially in that southeastern area. And you can also see little hatches along the pipelines that indicate different incidents, and those incidents refer to leaks and also to explosions. And you can see there's especially a lot along that very same pipeline that ends in that youth sports facility and tank farm. And lastly, we have these Superfund sites. These are sites that are regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency because they're so heavily contaminated with industrial pollutants that they're entirely unsafe for uses. And there are no less than 18 active Superfund sites in Delaware County, including 3 where we live in Haverford Township alone. I'm grateful to my daughter Sophie for making this image because we can't directly see, right, most of the pollution that's in the air, or in the water, or in the soil. In some cases, we're able to smell it or have some kind of visceral response, but most of it's invisible to us. But a lot of scientific research has been done over the decades, and it has clearly documented a lot of the contaminants that are in the air. And this includes a range of particulate matter, all kinds of gaseous pollutants, heavy metals. A study by Hopkins that just came out last week documented no less than 32 different volatile organic chemicals in the air in that southeastern strip of Delaware County. And we also have persistent organic pollutants. And these are significant because these never break down. So once you put them into the environment, they stay in the environment. So why does this matter, right? How does this relate to Bob's cancer? Well, it matters because our body's metabolism, how we generate energy, how our tissues and organs, vital functions work, it's comprised of billions of chemical reactions that are happening every second in our cells. So when we inhale air, or we take a drink from our kitchen faucet, or we garden in our backyard and we get our hands dirty with soil, our outsides literally become our insides. All of those different pollutants, and it's not just one, you can see it's a huge range of different kinds of chemicals, become part of the inside of our body. And when that happens, they change the biochemical reactions that are happening inside of our cells. In fact, cancer is, at its root, a metabolic disorder. It's cells where the biochemical reactions have gone so out of whack that the cell goes into a perpetual mode of biosynthesis, producing proteins and fatty acids and lipids and all sorts of things that it needs to proliferate and grow out of control. And in fact, we know that when we take these pollutants into our body, it can trigger cancer in 4 major ways. 1, through oxidative stress and inflammation. 2nd, it can disrupt the endocrine system in our body. These are the glands that produce hormones that allow the different tissues and organs in our body to communicate with one another. It can also cause direct damage to the DNA. It can cause a mutation or an error in that code of nucleotides, right? Or it can cause breakage in the DNA and cause 2 different chromosomes to come together, creating an entirely new gene, an oncogene, that promotes that cellular growth and proliferation. Lastly, these chemicals can cause epigenetic changes. By that we mean that the structure of the DNA is a physical structure. It's a double helix. And the presence of these chemicals can cause that structure to change. It can, for instance, open up in a way that causes a gene that's not normally actively coded to suddenly be in use. That could be an oncogene that promotes cellular growth and proliferation. So in short, it's extremely important to appreciate the way that our outsides become our insides and the way that these pollution in our environment can lead to diseases of a wide variety, certainly including cancer. Currently, though, we really lack the tools that we need to see those connections and that we need to see communities' lived experiences of cancer. So one of the things I've been working on recently is to develop a new tool that is simple and it's publicly accessible, but that helps to capture communities' lived experiences of cancer and to see some of the relationships with the polluting infrastructure in our environment. I call this tool the People's Cancer Incident Screening Tool, or PCIST. And effectively what it does is it lets us see signals for 23 different types of cancer in adults and to see where those rates are elevated as compared to the national average over a 20-year period of time from 2002 to 2021. And that long stretch of time is important because cancer takes a while to develop. And some rare types of cancer, you have a lot of fluctuation year to year in the incidence. So let's see what that looks like here in Delaware County. I know there's a lot on this slide, so let me break it down. On the right-hand side, we have those 23 different types of cancer, and each one has been assigned a specific color code. And in the parentheses just to the right of those names, you see a number, and that number refers to the median age of onset. And that's important to take into account because most cancers occur in older people. Age is the single biggest risk factor for developing cancer, with the exception of Hodgkin's lymphoma that has a bimodal incidence in the 20s and 30s and in the 50s, and testicular cancer, which is a cancer of young men. And then you can see, pointing out from Chester, we have our signals for Chester City. And you can see that there are 11 different types of cancer that are elevated in terms of the average annual incidence rate over that 20-year period of time as compared with the average rate for the U.S. population. And that range is from 16% for myeloma all the way on the right to 91% or almost double the incidence for liver and biocancer, the very cancer that Bob has. We can look at this more widely, and again, lots and lots of information on the slide. I think the main takeaway here, right, is that there's a lot of signals. There are a lot of different types of cancer that are really elevated as compared with the U.S. national average for these townships that are located in the southeastern part of Delaware County. And that the range for some of these, if we could take the one at the very bottom left, Marcus Hook, which is where that LNG refinery is located, it ranges from 51% all the way up to 299%. And you can see that that holds true quite widely. It's important for us to take into consideration the average age of these populations, of course, because if you just had an older population, maybe that explains why you have more signals. But we can see for Chester, the average age of the population is 30.6 as compared with 36.9 for the US national average in 2010. And what that tells us is that age does not explain those signals. In fact, if anything, those signals should be even brighter and more intense because it's a younger population. And the same with Marcus Hook, we have a population of 35.2, very close to the US national average. So those signals are real. Now, what about us up in the north, right? Up in Haverford or the Trico more generally. Swarthmore is a little bit more to the south. Bryn Mawr right by us, right? These are bucolic campuses, right? We live on green, leafy suburbs. They're beautiful. And we, I think in our everyday life could agree, aren't really conscious of there being pollution in our environment. Quite the contrary, we're in an arboretum, right? But when we run the numbers, what we see is quite striking. And I think it's important to take in the number of different cancers that are highly elevated in Swarthmore and in the Bryn Mawr and Haverford area, right? As well as the fact that air travels, right? Water, the water that we drink in Delaware County is part of the same shared sources, right? So there is nothing, and we have Superfund sites here in Haverford as well. So I think it's illusory to think that we live in some kind of bubble, as much as we'd like to believe that. The pollution that we put in the air becomes a part of all of us. For some residents, clearly more than others, but it becomes part of all of us. So what I wish for is that having seen these cancer signals, we might collectively as a society take a pause and really seriously think about and reconsider the ways that we organize our flows of energy and waste, how we structure and regulate our societal metabolism. Because there's no wall that separates our outsides from our inside. There's no wall that protects Bob's children living in their house and sleeping in their bedroom from what's right next door in that oil refinery. And there's no wall that separates the fields our children innocently play sports on from what we've built behind and beyond and around and above and under them. And the people have a right, the Pennsylvania Constitution declares, to clean air, to pure water, and to preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all its people, including generations yet to come. This isn't just a suggestion, it's a right. It's our children's right to health and to a future. Thank you.